What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. I recently did a video talking about what I think are the top 10 most powerful commanders you can build on a budget right now, and Helga was I think number 2 on the list. If you guys want to see that list, I'll leave it in the description down below. I also asked you guys in that video, vote in the comments down below what guy you want me to build from this list, and everybody wanted to see Helga. And I think we've come up with something that's pretty powerful here, and that might be an understatement. People are not going to see that this is a budget list because of how fast it just kills the entire table and casts the entire library. Helga's not okay, guys. So if that sounds like something you guys want to get into, stay tuned. Also, don't forget to click on that whatnot link in the description down below to get your free $15. And as always, you can use code DT4D to get 10% off all of your Tolarian library proxies. Now let's get into this Helga deck tech. The first thing I want to say right off rip is this deck is going to benefit the pilot that takes time into learning the deck. There's a lot of different scenarios where if we get 4 synergy pieces on the battlefield, it can result in us casting our entire library and winning the game. The key point to figuring out this deck is finding out when those pieces are on the battlefield and when you should go for it. I'm going to do my very best to explain what you're trying to look for whenever you can cast your entire library, but again, there's so many interactions here, I can't go through them all. What makes this deck work is 4 different categories. We have our bouncers, our clones, our untappers, and then finally our card draw engines. Let's talk about the untappers first. They're simple, straight to the point, but there are some that are really busted in this deck. We have Carador Monitor. This is 2 CMC, 1 generic, and a blue. It just enters the battlefield and then it gets to untap target artifact or creature. Hydrax Tower Scout, Bounding Krasis, and Deceiver Exart are all 3 CMC and do the exact same thing. Then we have Breaching Hippocamp. This is 4 CMC and again does the same thing, untaps another target creature you control. Village Bellringer is a little bit better because it's 3 CMC. Yes, these aren't going to trigger Helga if they're 3 CMC, but the thing is, if we're able to use the added mana we get from Helga to cast a creature to untap her and then keep casting more creatures, that's exactly what we want to do. Village Bellringer is also one of the best because it's going to untap all creatures we control, and we are playing some mana dorks in this deck. Quirion Ranger is a 1 CMC elf ranger that says return a forest you control to its owner's hand, and then we get to untap target creature. We can only activate that once per turn, but again guys, we are on bouncers in this deck, so it's not uncommon for us to bounce this girl to our hand, recast her, bounce another forest, and untap Helga again. Sereth the Viper's Fang, I really like this one. It's 4 CMC, 2 generic, and 2 green. Legendary creature, human warlock. Other tapped creatures you control have death touch, and then other untapped creatures you control have hexproof. So this is going to protect Helga. Additionally, we can pay 1 generic and tap Sereth to untap target creature or land we control. So if someone goes to target our Helga, we can untap her and then boom, she's got hexproof. Pretty useful here. Kiora's Follower, 2 CMC, 1 green and 1 blue, untap another target permanent. So it's kind of like a mana dork, and also it can untap Helga. Valley Flood Caller is kind of insane. For 2 generic and 1 blue, you get a creature otter wizard with flash. It says you may cast non-creature spells as though they had flash. Additionally, it says whenever you cast a non-creature spell, birds, frogs, otters, and rats you control get +1/+1 until end of turn. Untap them. So all we have to do is cast a non-creature spell and we get to untap Helga and make her bigger. I am game for that. We're not on a lot of non-creature spells, but this thing is still insane. A better card is Chakram Retriever, possibly one of the best, if not the best card in the deck. This is 4 generic and 1 blue, and then it says, whenever you cast a spell during your turn, untap target creature. So as long as we have this on the battlefield, we cast a creature, draw a card, untap Helga, cast a creature, draw a card, untap Helga, and then if we have other card draw engines like Beast Whisperer on the battlefield, this just gets ramped to 1,000 and we can probably cast our entire library. Great Oak Guardian also can lend itself to being combo-y. This is 5 generic and 1 green, it has flash, reach, and when Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, target creatures players controls gets +2/+2 until end of turn, untap them. So not only does this give Helga +2/+2, but we also untap all of our creatures and give our entire board +2/+2. We'll talk about how this card is not okay later in the deck tech. Aura of Dominance, for 2 blue, you get an enchantment aura that says pay 1, tap an untapped creature you control, untap enchanted creature. So now we're tapping other creatures to untap Helga, and it's going to be pretty busted. Derevi Imperial Tacticianer, for 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue, you get a legendary creature bird wizard that says whenever Derevi enters the battlefield or creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may tap or untap target permanent. Very useful for untapping Helga in the combat step, and then additionally, this guy can go infinite a couple ways just because entering the battlefield and untapping Helga is not okay. Teardrop Kami, this one's probably the worst, but also it comes down turn 1, so we love it. For 1 blue, we get a spirit creature that says sacrifice Teardrop Kami, tap or untap target creature. Really simple. This is where our clones come into play. We are on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different clones that are 4 CMC. Allowing these to enter the battlefield as our 3 CMC untappers not only triggers Helga, but again, it's going to untap another creature. These clones are also just super flexible. They can be any creature on the battlefield, and they can result in us winning the game a couple different ways. We are on Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant. If you have 2 of these on the battlefield, it's just GG. What's going to happen is Hullbreaker Horror for 7 mana, 5 generic and 2 blue, says flash. This spell can't be countered. Whenever you cast a spell, choose up to 1. Return target spell you don't control to its owner's hand, or you can return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. A clone spell, right? Additionally, Tidespout Tyrant for 8 mana is 5 generic and then 3 blue. It says whenever you cast a spell, return target permanent to its owner's hand. So with 2 of these on the battlefield, we're able to cast a creature and then not only bounce a creature back to our hand that allows us to untap Helga, additionally, we're able to bounce one of our opponent's things. So now, whenever we're casting an infinite amount of creatures, generating infinite mana, we also get infinite bounce, and we can just bounce our opponent's entire board. Not okay, but it's all budget and it's all broken. Hullbreaker Horror and Tidespout Tyrant also allow us to generate infinite mana whenever we have 2 creatures that untap Helga. All we have to do is cast something like a Corridor Monitor, it enters the battlefield, untaps Helga, and then we can cast something like a Hydrax Tower Scout, it again enters the battlefield, untaps Helga, and then we're going to return Corridor Monitor back to our hand. The only problem is none of these are 4 CMC and we're not actually able to draw our library, and that's where the clones come into play. Just having the clones be 4 CMC and are able to copy these untap effects makes the deck super consistent. Once you cast either Tidespout Tyrant or Hullbreaker Horror, there is no shortage of ways this deck can cast its entire library. Before we move on, I did want to mention the win cons here, because once you cast your entire library, how do you win the game, right? That's pretty simple here. We have a couple haste enablers. We have Uvenwald Behemoth, which is just Uvenwald Oddity but flipped. Uvenwald Oddity for 2 generic and 2 green, you get a creature beast with trample and haste. And then for 7 mana, you can transform Uvenwald Oddity, and it says trample, haste, other creatures you control get +1/+1 and have trample and haste. The other route we can take is Renati Behemoth Collar. For 2 generic and 1 green, you get a legendary creature Cat Shaman that says whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value 5 or greater, that creature enters the battlefield with X additional 1/1 counters on it, where X is the mana value -4. Additionally, creatures you control with 3 or more 1/1 counters on them have haste, and then it taps for 1 green. Basically, once we cast our entire library, we need to give our creatures haste. That way they can attack and kill everybody, and then Greater Oak Guardian is very easily able to buff up our board enough to kill the entire table. Clement the Worrywart is also insane in this deck. It doesn't go infinite, but it's kind of just enough 9 times out of 10. For 1 generic, 1 green, and 1 blue, you get a legendary creature Frog Druid that has vigilance and says whenever Clement the Worrywart or another creature you control enters, return up to 1 target creature you control with lesser mana value to its owner's hand. Frogs you control have add 1 green or blue, spend this mana only to cast creature spells. Honestly, this is just insane. Think about our untappers. If we have something like an Hydrax Tower Scout and we have something like a clone to copy the Hydrax Tower Scout, we can cast the clone, bounce Hydrax back to our hand, and then cast Hydrax again. That's going to be insane. Vincer is also insane here because he can bounce himself. For 4 CMC, 2 generic, and 2 blue, you get a legendary creature Human Wizard that says when Vincer Shaper Savant enters the battlefield, return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. So Vincer enters, Vincer returns himself, and this gives us a repeatable 4 CMC creature to cast. If you have Chakra Retriever on the battlefield, boom, you've just won the game. I'm also on Shore Up. For 1 blue, you get an instant that says target creature you control gets +1/+1 and gains hexproof until end of turn. Untap it. Kind of insane. Not only does this protect our commander, it untaps our commander, and it makes our commander bigger. It's doing everything we want, all for 1 CMC. This card's really good here. The next thing we need is more card draw engines. Just drawing 1 card off of 1 4 CMC creature is not good enough. We want to be drawing 3, maybe 4 cards off of a creature whenever we cast it. That's going to take this deck to the next level. level. So Primordial Sage and Soul of the Harvest simply say, whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card, or whenever you cast a creature spell, you may draw a card. They're both 6 CMC, they both trigger Helga, they're perfect here. Chulane Teller of Tales, I like this. For 2 generic, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue, you get a legendary creature human druid that says Vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card, then you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. It also has a tap ability that's 3 generic that says return target creature you control to its owner's hand. So it can even return stuff back to our hand to recast, triggering Helga again. Our next card is Inga and Asika. For 2 generic, 1 green, and 1 blue, we get a legendary creature human god that says creatures you control have vigilance and add 1 mana of any color. Spend this mana only to cast creature spells. It also says whenever you cast a creature spell, if 3 or more mana from a creature was spent to cast it, draw a card. So now we're able to trigger Helga off of casting 3 CMC creatures or just twice whenever she casts anything above 4 CMC. Super solid. Beast Whisperer, 4 CMC, 2 blue, 3 green. Says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Radagast the Brown is super cool here. It can whiff, but it can also find us our key pieces. For 2 generic and 2 green, we get a legendary creature avatar wizard that says whenever Radagast the Brown or another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, look at the top X cards of your library where X is the creature's mana value. You may reveal a creature card that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control from among those cards and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library. So he's super strong card selection here. Selvala Eager Trailblazer is really strong here and has a ton of synergy. For 2 generic, 1 green, and a white, you get a legendary creature Elf Scout with Vigilance that says whenever you cast a creature spell, create a 1/1 red mercenary creature token with a tap ability that says target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, activate only as a sorcery. So we're able to create these mercenaries that are able to tap and make Helga bigger. Additionally, she has a broken tap ability that allows us to choose a color and add 1 mana of that color for each different power among creatures you control to your mana pool. So that's insane. And right out of the gate, I just want to show how weird this deck can get and what kind of shenanigans we can get into. Imagine we have Helga, Chulane, and Selvala on the battlefield, and then we cast a Great Oak Guardian. This is going to untap all 3 of them, and then we can use the mana from Selvala to actually return Great Oak Guardian back to our hand. Then we tap Selvala, cast Great Oak Guardian again, and then boom, we're able to use Chulane's tap ability to return Great Oak Guardian, Selvala to pay for his tap ability, and then Helga to recast it, allowing us to again draw our entire deck. And there is no shortage of interactions in this deck that can just kind of get you there, and you really don't see them until you're playing it. Kyruga is also going to make an appearance here. For 3 generic and then 2 green and blue hybrid mana, we get a legendary Dinosaur Hippo creature that says whenever Kyruga enters the battlefield, draw a card for each other permanent you control with converted mana cost 3 or greater. That's the majority of the deck, so this card can draw 5 to 10 cards super easily, and then again, we can just bounce this back to our hand in a lot of different scenarios, or just clone it with a clone spell. Silverback Elder is also super backbreaking in this deck. For 2 generic and then 3 green, we get a creature ape shaman that says whenever you cast a creature spell, choose one. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, look at the top 5 cards of your library, you may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield tapped, put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order, or you can gain 4 life. Shalai Voice of Plenty seemed solid here as well. For 3 generic and 1 white, you get a legendary creature angel that has flying and says you, planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control have hexproof. Additionally, it has an ability for 4 generic and then 2 green, you get to put a 1/1 counter on each creature you control. Notably, again, we do need to find a way to put 3 1/1 counters on every single creature to give them haste to win the game. Another super solid way to do this is Defiler of Vigor. This is going to allow us to pay Phyrexian green mana for all of our green mana pips, and then whenever we cast a green permanent spell, we get to put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. So getting those 3 1/1 counters is not hard with this guy. Miss Bumbleflower also seems super solid in this deck, not only to buff up Helga, but just for some solid card advantage. For 1 generic, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue, you get a legendary creature Rabbit Citizen that has vigilance, and whenever you cast a spell, target opponent draws a card, you get to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. I would choose Helga. Additionally, it gains flying until end of turn. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, you get to draw 2 cards. This is another card we can kind of bounce to our hand to get added value if we need more card advantage pieces, and we're just casting 3 CMC creatures over and over again. Forgotten Ancient also seems super solid here to make Helga massive. For 3 generic and 1 green, you get a creature elemental that says whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a 1/1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of 1/1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto another creature. Again, I'm probably choosing Helga here. Communal Brewing is one of my favorite cards, especially in decks that just want to cast a ton of creatures. It's also going to very easily get us our 3 1/1 counters to give all of our creatures haste. It's a 3 CMC enchantment, 2 generic and 1 green that says when Communal Brewing enters the battlefield, any number of target opponents each get to draw a card, put an ingredient counter on Communal Brewing, then put an ingredient counter on it for each card drawn this way. 9 times out of 10, you want to let everybody draw here and just put 4 counters on it, because it says whenever you cast a creature spell, that creature enters with X additional 1/1 counters on it, where X is the number of ingredient counters on Communal Brewing. Also really busted to cast this before casting Helga, because boom, out of the gate, she's tapping for 4 mana. Super powerful here. Noxious Gearhulk for 5 CMC, 3 generic, and then 2 green. You get an artifact creature construct with trample, and it says whenever Virtuous Gearhulk enters the battlefield, distribute 4 1/1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. Again, I'm choosing Helga here and just slapping 4 1/1 counters on her. Conclave Mentor for 1 green and 1 white. You get a creature that says if 1 or more counters would be put on a creature you control, put that many +1 counters on that creature instead. So it's super solid. Now we're getting 2 creatures per 4 CMC creature we cast. Hamza is also an insane creature here. For 6 CMC, 4 generic, and then a green and a white, you get a legendary creature, Elephant Warrior, that says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it. And then once this guy's on the battlefield, he gives that reduction to all other creatures you cast. So if you have Defiler Vigor and this guy on the battlefield, you are literally only going to spend the mana pips to cast your creatures. Isroot Channeler does something very similar. For 6 CMC, 5 generic, and 1 green, you get a creature Treefolk Druid that says reach creature spells you cast cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Additionally, he has a tap ability that says gain 2 life. What's very powerful about this is his ability is a static ability, so he does not actually have to tap to give you that cost reduction. That means this guy doesn't need haste to start giving us value. Helga's gaining us life whenever we're casting those 4 CMC creatures. So now every single 4 CMC creature is reducing the generic cost of all of our other creatures. This is extremely broken. Cutzel also makes an appearance here. For 1 generic, 1 green, and 1 white, you get a legendary Cat Warrior that says your opponent can't cast spells on your turn, and then whenever 1 or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it's a little bit of card advantage, a little bit of protecting us on our insane turn, because Helga's one of those decks, they don't realize you've got it until you start going off, and then they're like, oh no, I need to interact with this. But yeah, not with Cutzel on the battlefield. Tell me what you guys think about the deck tech overall. I really enjoyed building this one. As always, I hope this helped you in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you in the next one.